Me here to talk important stuff. Keep you safe. If something goes wrong like fire, there is dynamite in building, and an unheard of alarm will sound. What we do when alarm make noise? That right. We leave building my quickest way. Now for dynamite, we make hole in building and walk straight out. We're not strong enough for that, so you go through exit closest to you. You walk, not run. If me, Grimlock, catch you running, well, you see how we treat Sharkticons.
For those wondering why Energon Downshift couldn't be called Wheeljack, you know, the name that actually makes sense given his design, blame this bugger. Presenting Armada Wheeljack. But first, let's check out his minicon partner, Windshear, who I don't think showed up in the cartoon once. His alt mode captures the sharp angles of the F117A Nighthawk, though lacks the front-to-back downward slope of the real deal, and instead of twin tail fins, he has just the one, possibly to get around licensing. He's nicely color coordinated with his larger partner, and they even painted tiny cockpit windows. There's no getting around the undercarriage junk. At this size it's even more inevitable than usual. At least the feet and arms could pass off as twin guns and engine boosters respectively. While the head is nondescript, the rest of Windshear's design is kickin'. He sports the typical cockpit chest, nothing new there, but his wings form horizontal back-swept shoulder pads. I'm sure he's not the only Transformer to do this, but damn if it doesn't look cool. As you can imagine, Windshear's articulation is pretty basic. Because of these little guards, the arms can't swing past his torso, only backwards for the transformation, when they could have cut the guards off. You can cheat by rotating the wings back, and raising them causes the arms to splay outwards, so I'll give him that. The hips swing forward a bit, as well as all the way back, his knees are ball jointed, and the ankles rock back and forth. As for Wheeljack, his vehicle mode is said to be based on the Ferrari F50, again with minor tweaks, like the lack of air vents within the hood, and most obviously, the trio of minicon ports, though he retains the same sleek profile, the spoiler design, and the rear chassis vents. Like Blur, if you're expecting a G1 homage of any kind, other than turning into a car and being an Autobot at some point in his life, they have zilch in common. Though that second part is perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this character, let alone figure. Because if I recall, Armada Wheeljack was the first televised Transformers good guy defector entirely of his own volition, or at the very least one of the earliest. This is reflected via the very prominent slashed hood sigil, complete with molded and painted robotic circuitry inside. It's not flat or a temperograph either, it's an actual layered 3D wound. You also have the tiny Decepticon symbol below, so any repaint of this mold is stuck being a turncoat. The yellow markings and metallic lilac windows keep the car from looking too monochrome, though the amount of yellow is inaccurate to the show, where he actually sports several blue decals, something the Takara version rectifies. Of the 3 minicon ports, only the one on the roof activates a gimmick. Any minicon should do, though the indentation surrounding the port is somewhat shaped like Windshear himself. Press down and we have spring-loaded gull-winged doors with built-in spring-loaded launchers. Much like Hotshot's saw-blade feet, this gimmick is also a transformation step. In fact, the doors seem to be the only thing holding the car together. There's a tab and slot in the rear section, but unless I own a bad copy, it's more for guidance than an actual locking mechanism. Armada Wheeljack's robot design clearly resembles Generation 1's Sideswipe, with the flat hood chest, shoulder wheels, and rear halves of the car forming boots. Even the head sports Sideswipe's crest, side vents, and specifically the G1 toy's horns. It wouldn't surprise me if this toy was supposed to bear that name initially. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. With this in mind, you'd think I'd be all over this guy, since G1 Sideswipe has my favourite design of the Series 1 Autobots. And for what it's worth, Wheeljack doesn't wear the entire car on his back like Blur and is pretty well proportioned, save for his somewhat weedy arms. Unfortunately, the abundance of white that becomes a main colour for this mode, while faithful, doesn't make the overall deco any less of a snorefest. Also, while subpar articulation is the norm for Armada, it's especially frustrating here seeing how they could have feasibly worked in more without altering the base design that much. The head lacks a neck joint of any kind, though to be fair, the yellow wall behind it would impede movement anyway. The hips swing back and forth, the feet and heel spurs tilt, and there are swivels above the knees, but the knees themselves lock into place for the transformation. Disconnect them and the shins flop to hell and back. Come on, ratchets would have sufficed. Only the arms have semi-decent posability. The shoulders rotate a full 360, the upper arms swing in and out on swivels below the shoulders, and his elbows bend 90 degrees. Strangely enough, only the right wrist rotates. Why? While it doesn't excuse what we got, at least Hotshot was structured in such a way that incorporating more joints would have been a challenge without redesigning the toy from scratch. Wheeljack's articulation, on the other hand, was salvageable. It's disappointing. If you raise the backpack, Wheeljack can still utilize his door launchers, though he can't aim straight forward. And the missiles themselves double as batons, which I believe he used several times in the show. Ultimately, Armada Wheeljack is the perfect inoffensive figure, as neither mode entices nor aggravates. Sure, he's a brick, but he generally looks fine if a bit bland. The car mode's solid, the robot's mostly clean, and the main gimmick is serviceable. Windshear's actually a visually dynamic design, and if you're somehow able to fit him on a flight stand, I'd say he has enough posability to show it off, though like Wheeljack's, it could be better. Still, a decent minicon all around. If Wheeljack himself wasn't such a statue, this set might have gotten a silver, but as is, it just falls short. Short. Well, I can think of worse ways to foreshadow a minicon pack review.